Over the next 4 days, the Tuareg guide led the expedition to 13 more, some smaller, some larger. The largest, the 42-metre specimen, was found half buried in a depression that the guide indicated had once been a lake. According to local oral tradition, the tree had not fallen there. It had been moved. The guide told Marchand that the legend was older than any of the local tribes, older than Islam. His grandfather had told him that the giants who once walked the world had used these trees for something the modern people no longer understood. Now, the skeptical reading of all this is that Marchand was either deluded, lying, or measuring something that was not actually a tree. Maybe these were unusual rock formations. Maybe his measurements were wrong. Here is the problem with that reading. Renard, the geologist, filed an independent report. His report agreed with Marchand's measurements. The photographer, Vasseur, took plates of the formations, and at least 3 of those plates were reproduced in the original 1903 publication before it was withdrawn. 2 of those reproductions still exist, scanned by a researcher named Jean-Claude Beaumont in the late 1980s. The photographs show what appear to be petrified tree trunks of enormous size, with a human figure included for scale in 2 of the images. The figure is barely visible. He is standing at the base of the trunk, and he comes up to about 1/15 of its diameter. That is not a rock formation. That is not a measurement error. That is a tree that should not exist. So, what is mainstream science's explanation for these objects? There is no mainstream explanation, because mainstream science does not acknowledge that they exist. The 1903 report was withdrawn. The photographs were destroyed. The site has either been buried by shifting sand or, in the more controversial accounts, has been deliberately covered. There are claims, unverified but persistent, that French colonial authorities sent a follow-up expedition in 1907 with explosives, and that the expedition destroyed the largest specimens before sealing what remained under sand. Why would they do that? The answer, if you accept the framework that researchers in the Tartaria field have been working with for the past 2 decades, is that the discovery did not fit the official narrative of human history. By 1903, that narrative had already been established, codified, taught in universities, and was being aggressively defended against any evidence that contradicted it. To understand why this matters, we have to talk about Tartaria. Tartaria, or Great Tartary as it appears on dozens of European maps from the 16th, 17th and 18th centuries, was a vast region covering most of what is now Russia, Central Asia, Mongolia, and parts of China. The first edition of the Encyclopaedia Britannica, published in 1771, describes it as the largest empire in the world by land area. The same entry is significantly shorter in the second edition, removed entirely by the third, and by the fourth edition, Tartary has vanished from the encyclopedia altogether. Then, sometime in the late 18th and early 19th centuries, Tartaria disappears from the maps. It does not get conquered, it does not break up into successor states, it simply vanishes from the cartographic record. The Tartaria research community points to the consistency of the term across multiple centuries and multiple cartographic traditions. They point to the architectural anomalies scattered across the former Tartarian territory, structures that appear to predate the civilizations officially credited with building them, structures whose construction methods do not match the technological capacities of the populations supposedly responsible. This is where the petrified trees come in. If the Tartaria framework is correct, and there was a global civilization that predated the one we know about, a civilization that was deliberately erased from the historical record, then the question is not whether evidence of that civilization exists. The question is where the evidence has been hidden, suppressed, or destroyed. The 1903 Sahara survey fits the pattern almost perfectly. The trees Marchand documented were not local Sahara species. The size alone rules that out. There is no botanical lineage in the African fossil record that produces trees of those dimensions. So either we have a previously unknown species that grew nowhere else and left no other fossil record, or we have something stranger. Trees that did not grow there, trees that were brought there, trees that were used for some purpose then abandoned. Some Tartaria researchers argue that the petrified trunks Marchand found were the remnants of a massive infrastructure project, a harvested resource possibly used in construction.